Hello from the Channel Studio in London and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the programme that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. On the programme this week, political leaders in the United States call for unity ahead of November election following attempted assassination of Donald Trump, plus several injured as Kenyan anti-government protests intensify again. Following the attempted assassination of former U.S. President Donald Trump at a campaign rally in Pennsylvania, politicians on both sides are now calling for unity in a bid to cool the heated political atmosphere. The attack has put the divided nation on edge in the run-up to the presidential election in November. Donald Trump had just started to speak about the dangers of migration when multiple shots rang out. A bullet pierced the upper part of the former U.S. president's ear. A spectator was killed, while two other people were seriously injured. The gunman was also killed.
So I heard the first shot, and as soon as I heard that first shot, I turned over and I looked at Trump, and then I heard two more. It was like bang, bang, bang. It was like three right in a row. I looked at Trump, and I saw him looking, and I saw him drop to the ground. It's still very surreal. Like, it's hard to believe that it happened. It's hard to believe, like, you know, when you think about the history moments that happened, like 9/11, or I wasn't alive when John F. Kennedy got shot, but I still remember, you know, everybody saying they knew where they were when that happened, right? I know where I was when this happened. I was right there, right? It's something that I'll never forget.
Several bystanders appeared to have seen the gunman before security forces did, raising sharp questions about the security provided to the Republican candidate.
He had a rifle. We could clearly see him with a rifle. Absolutely. We're pointing at him. The police are down there running around on the ground. We're like, hey, man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle. And the police were like, huh, what? You know, like they didn't know what was going on. You know, we're like, hey, right here on the roof. We can see him from right here. We see him. You know, he's crawling. And next thing you know, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, why is Trump still speaking? Why have they not pulled him off the stage? I'm standing there pointing at him for, 2-3 minutes. Secret Service is looking at us from the top of the barn. I'm pointing at that roof, just standing there like this. And next thing you know, 5 shots ring out.
For many Americans, the attack is an indicator of how divided the country has become.
It's something that didn't happen after Clinton. At least I don't think so. But now that it's happening again, I think it just proves that there's so much divide in this country and that people really think that Trump is just, I personally don't think he's adequate to be our president. He's very vile, very divisive. And I think that he's just dividing this country.
The point of this was really to let the community know we're praying for them. It was not an issue of praying for this person to be president, that person to be president. It was rather just pray for our nation, pray for the people of our nation, pray for our community. We're here, and it happened right there. Of course our nation's been divided. I mean, there have been civil war, there has been assassinations, there have been rhetoric lately that seems very divisive. But we're all, freedom is always something that is a tension to be held up. And so it's not necessarily because more than ever we need it. We always need prayer. We always need the Holy Spirit to do a work in our hearts. We always need the gospel of Jesus Christ. But it happened in our backyard, so it's on our minds more. So it was more in regards to where it happened than that it happened.
That God will use these events, as terrible as they are, to bring people who don't know him, to bring people in his church, to bring people that are hurting, to bring this whole community closer to him in the process, closer to realizing that he is in control. He has the answers even when we don't. He has the peace that surpasses all understanding, and we can always turn to him. Maybe just a little bit more closer than we were turning to him yesterday. And if that's all that brings out of this tragedy, then God can use that to bring peace to people who might not have had it, or maybe who needed it a little bit more.
Not believe it. I
could not believe that that actually happened here in America. It's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous, and it's sad.
It's pretty shocking, the world we live in. It's like we've gone back to the 1960s. I remember as a kid playing on a playground when John F. Kennedy was shot. Maybe I was 5 or 6. You would hope that the world has progressed to the point that we respect other people. And obviously we're, 60 years later, and we're in the same position we were in the 1960s. Very contentious.
Both Republicans and Democrats have made calls to lower the political temperature and unite the country. Following the attempt on his life, Donald Trump said he plans to give a different kind of speech focused on bringing the country together rather than focus attacks on his rival, Joe Biden.
We don't know
on his part, the U.S. president, making a rare address from the Oval Office, called on the country to stand together and settle political differences peacefully at the ballot box.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence, for any violence ever. Period. No exceptions. We can't allow this violence to be normalized. The political record in this country has gotten very heated. It's time to cool it down. We all have a responsibility to do that. Yes, we have deeply felt strong disagreements. The stakes in this election are enormously high. Disagreement is inevitable in American democracy. It's part of human nature. But politics must never be a literal battlefield, or God forbid, a killing field. I believe politics ought to be an arena for peaceful debate, to pursue justice, to make decisions guided by the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. We stand for an America, not of extremism and fury, but of decency and grace.
Saturday's assassination attempt is also added to the debate about gun violence in the country. Most Republicans are set against any type of reform to America's gun laws.
I don't think it's about guns, because guns don't kill people. Crazy people kill people. Mentally ill people kill people. People, kill with all sorts of, they poison people, they use knives. I don't think this is and I don't think it's a time to be making it about a gun debate. I think that it was a Secret Service issue. I think that it was, a diligence of duty. But I don't think that guns is the major factor here.
We need our weapons to protect ourselves. We're still in that era. And as long as we're human beings that I can see, we need our weapons to take care of ourselves, to defend ourselves. And what happened is appalling. People were pointing out that shooter, and what did speaking bad about the blue or FBI or anything, but my God, why didn't you listen to the people? They're telling you.
I believe that we wouldn't have a July 4th, 1776 without guns. So I absolutely support our Second Amendment right to the fullest. And I believe that President Trump should have better security around him.
This wasn't a gun problem, and what happened to President Trump, it was a human problem. It was a madman trying to take another person's life. You got to be crazy.
In 2022, President Joe Biden signed the first major gun safety bill in decades, which blocked gun sales to those convicted of domestic violence and gave new funding to state red flag programs to remove guns from people deemed dangerous. In February, speaking to the National Rifle Association, Donald Trump pledged to undo all gun-related restrictions enacted by Joe Biden, who he faces in the November the 5th election. Over in Kenya, anti-government protesters have returned to the streets, stepping up demands for President William Ruto to resign. Despite his recent concessions, the protest began last month against an unpopular tax bill, which has since been withdrawn. Dozens of people have been killed in the protest so far. Youth-led nationwide demonstrations that broke out a month ago against proposed tax hikes have continued across Kenya. This is even after President William Ruto withdrew the legislation and fired most of his cabinet. Many demonstrators are demanding that the president step down, blaming him for misgovernance, corruption, and the deaths of at least 50 protesters during earlier anti-government rallies.
We want Ruto must go. That is the one, because he has failed to give us accountability. We as people.
This is the fourth week protesting on the streets. We're still protesting because Ruto could have easily dissolved this from the first week. He would have signed off his people from the first week. He would have stepped down from the first week. But he's waited this long. All these people have died, all this life loss, and still he cannot see the bigger impact he's creating on the country.
Government is listening now because of the protests. So we are kind of happy, but there's also a lot of sadness because so many people died for the government to listen. As of today, we have 51 dead because you have over 100 people in hospital with gunshot injuries and they're succumbing to those injuries. So we're also mourning, and we're telling the families of those who lost their loved ones, we're with you, and we shall honor that sacrifice.
We just have to keep pushing forward. Obviously, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and along the way we are going to lose some people. Along the way we are going to gain people as well. What is important is for us to stay consistent until we get to where we see Kenya is where we want it to be.
In Kitengela, a town on the southern outskirts of the capital Nairobi, police fired repeatedly in the direction of hundreds of demonstrators.
We have no use for...
The president has accused criminals of hijacking peaceful protests and the Ford Foundation, an American organization, of sponsoring the unrest. Tuesday's protests appeared to be the largest since President Ruto withdrew the tax increases on June the 26th. He's now caught between the demands of lenders like the International Monetary Fund to cut deficits and a population reeling from a rising cost of living. Protesters have directed some of their anger at the IMF, accusing it of being the driving force behind the now scrapped tax hikes.
We've been seeing frequent abroad trips, nothing in this country, until we started demonstrating in the streets. That's nowadays we're having president in this country. We're having our president in this country. Ruto is very much incompetent. He has no leadership skills. He just wanted the title to be the president of this country. The guy is a puppet to IMF, that group. Whatever he's doing for this country at all.
The IMF has said its main goal through its lending programs with Kenya has been helping the country to overcome economic challenges and improve its people's well-being. President Ruto's office had announced multi-sectoral talks for this week to address grievances raised by the protesters, but there was no sign they had begun. Most of the leading activists behind the protest have rejected the invitation, instead calling for immediate action on issues like corruption. When Foreign Dispatches returns in just a moment, Ukraine's mobilization campaign picks up after draft expansion prompted thousands to go into hiding. More details after the break. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us on the program. Hundreds of thousands of ordinary Ukrainians have volunteered to serve on the front line since the start of the war. However, over 2 years on, it appears less people are eager to join the fight. The Ukrainian army is urgently seeking to replenish its ranks in response to a renewed Russian offensive, and thousands of people have gone into hiding after an expansion of the draft in April.
This combat veteran is waging a different kind of battle on the streets of Kyiv to replenish troop numbers. He says men are less eager to fight than before, 28 months after Russia's invasion. There's a queue outside the local draft office, but men under 60 now have to register or renew their personal data at draft offices or online by July the 16th, and draft officials say they've struggled with a sudden influx.
People used to wait for weeks to get the chance to join the army. Now, as far as I know, most of the queues are people who want to obtain some sort of exemption.
As he handed out call-up papers, one man slipped into a nearby store and another refused to stop. Others quietly obliged. President Volodymyr Zelensky has lowered the draft age to 25 from 27 and overhauled the mobilization process. Recruitment numbers are shrouded in wartime secrecy, but the Ukraine military has said conscription more than doubled in May and June compared to the previous 2 months, without providing figures. Many weary troops are desperate to be replaced after more than 2 years of almost non-stop service.
We don't use force. We don't twist anyone's arms. We don't force them into minivans. We're against these methods. I'm personally against them. I believe that Ukrainians are a free people. We're fighting this war to be free and to take decisions that we want to take. There are those who react positively, I'd say up to 70% of the time. I don't even have to explain anything to them. They understand that nobody else will do this, except for themselves.
In an April survey commissioned by a state broadcaster, about half of Ukrainians thought mobilization was going poorly, and 60% had a negative view of draft officers. Though strengthened by long-delayed Western aid, Ukraine's forces have struggled for months to hold the line against Russian troops, who are inching forwards in the east. In early July, Ukraine's capital suffered one of its worst days of airstrikes since the start of the war, and attacks across the country have killed at least 44 people, including at children's hospitals. Moscow denies attacking the hospital and has blamed Ukrainian anti-missile fire for the hit on the clinic, which is one of Europe's largest and treats patients with serious conditions such as cancer and kidney disease.
Meanwhile, Ukrainians are battling a record heat wave as residents also grapple with rolling blackouts from Russia's continued attacks on the country's energy system. The combination is creating a nightmare for the wider economy and everyday life.
By torchlight, Ukrainian mother Margarita Zakharchuk carries her child up to the 12th floor apartment. The lift is out due to a blackout. She is one of millions of Ukrainians struggling amid a record heatwave compounded by regular power cuts, making air conditioning units and refrigerators useless.
The first thing that has changed is that we don't cook much anymore. Secondly, we cannot store products in the fridge for a long time. For example, cold snacks for children spoil quickly. On the second and third day, they are not edible anymore. That's why we only buy food that we can eat today or tomorrow.
Regular Russian airstrikes have ravaged the country's energy system, leading to hours-long rolling blackouts.
But the worst is possibly yet to come, as energy companies and the Ukrainian authorities caution that repeated strikes have reduced the ability to make the necessary repairs to heat homes during winter. Again, senseless suffering.
The Central Geophysical Observatory said it had clocked a record high 93.5 degrees Fahrenheit in Kyiv for July the 15th. Store owners like Victoria battle increased costs from running generators and product losses.
We suffer a lot. Blackouts last for 6 to 8 hours during the day, and it's a problem for dairy and ice cream. We don't order a lot of milk, butter because it spoils.
Freezer is dependent on power. We put ice cream inside, it gets frozen there. If there is no power or power generator, then there is no ice cream and no sales.
Ukrainians' broader economy is also struggling in the heat. State weather forecasters say the harvest of late crops could decline by up to 30% in central, southern and eastern regions. The country's grid operator announced new emergency power shutdowns for some consumers in 7 areas. The country's grid operator announced new emergency power shutdowns for some consumers in 7 areas, but not including Kyiv due to the heat wave following a failure of equipment. The Energy Ministry has also urged consumers to conserve energy and minimise the use of powerful electrical appliances to preserve the grid.
And away from the war in Ukraine, women in Somalia are joining the male-dominated traffic police profession, even as a security drive in the country opens up more roles. After recent Al-Shabaab attacks in Mogadishu, Somalia's capital, authorities have intensified operations by deploying more personnel and setting up checkpoints.
For the first time in years, women are among the new faces patrolling the streets of the Somali capital as traffic police officers, reflecting efforts to increase the number of women in public roles amid a security crackdown. Frequent insurgency attacks have prompted authorities to increase their operations by deploying more staff, setting up checkpoints and recruiting young women like 28-year-old Samira Abdullah to help control the city's traffic congestion.
The problems we face include narrow roads and traffic jams, and this forces us to work all day. But we were trained to open jammed streets. I am satisfied with my job because we work for our people. We, the Somali female traffic police, the job is our choice. We applied for the job.
The role was previously off limits for women in the conservative Muslim nation, where they traditionally worked only behind desks in administrative jobs. According to Traffic Police Commander Muse Mohammed, Abdullah's pioneering presence has inspired more Somali women to apply.
Since we employed women, we get applications from many women who also want to join the traffic police. The employed ladies showed the importance of women working in the streets and the beauty of the streets. They work well. They inspire more new women, and they give them the opportunity to join the traffic police. So now we have many women applying. We want to sort them and then train them. We shall select them in that way.
While Somalia remains a conservative society with patchy rule of law, Abdullah's presence is seen as a sign of gradual gains for women's rights and roles.
I encourage Somali women to become traffic police officers and work for their people. I tell the public, work with us, and we work for you. Correct your mistakes. Most of you are good, and we urge you to correct the mistakes you are making.
Her position in the public sphere brings Abdullah a sense of recognition from the community.
The new traffic police women are very good. They are better than their male counterparts. They check licenses and observe and implement law and order.
Abdullah says each day she steps onto the bustling streets of Mogadishu, her presence is a symbol of the evolving role of women in Somali society.
And that's the programme today, but remember our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you for watching. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. Bye for now.